Don't nobody care about your business. My plan comes first before anything else. My daughter's birthday parties are biggest priority. If you don't get her gifts right away, I'll ruin your daughter's funeral. Deafening yell from my mother-in-law. Regretting picking up the call from my mother-in-law at the funeral, I was shaking with anger. My name is Amy. I'm a housewife in my mid-40s with a daughter who's in high school. You might think a high school girl would be fussy about makeup and fashion, rejecting clothes her mother buys, but my daughter is different. She gets along with me and gladly wears the clothes I buy. She's a considerate and kind girl, but she's not like most girls her age. She can't lead a normal life, putting on makeup, dressing up, falling in love, and enjoying her student life. It's tough. Are you okay? Your fever, yeah, it's a bit down. Want to eat something? I'm not hungry. I don't want anything. You shouldn't say that. If you don't eat, you won't have any energy. I'll prepare some soup for you. Okay. As I worry over my daughter who is bedridden with fever, I continue the household chores. My daughter Hannah is sickly and suffers from a weak constitution. There's a medical term for what she has, but I'm not going into details here. A week after Hannah was born, her umbilical cord fell off and blood gushed out of her. We took her to the hospital where they found she had a certain disease. Since then, despite numerous treatments, she has never fully recovered and has been living with the disease. Regular hospital visits are a must, and due to the side effects of her medication, her health often deteriorates. During severe periods, she has to be hospitalized. Since becoming a high school student, she's hardly been able to attend school. By any standard, it's unlikely that she'll graduate at this rate. Nevertheless, Hannah goes to school on days she's well. On those days, she tries to be like a normal high school girl, fussing over her hairstyle, which brings a smile to my face. She doesn't wear makeup because it's against the school rules. A diligent and good girl. Even when she's suffering from illness, she strives to live with a cheerful spirit. I am proud to have a daughter like her. My husband is equally smitten with our daughter. If she becomes bedridden, he's quick to say, "I'll take the day off work and look after her." Of course, I have to give him a little push and send him off to work. We need him to keep bringing home the bacon or we'll fall into a financial crisis. When I assure him that I'll take good care of Hannah, he reluctantly heads off to work. That's our everyday life. We're worried about our daughter, but our family is in good spirits, and I have a strong bond with my husband as well. I was blessed living a peaceful life. But there was one person who wasn't pleased with our situation. Hannah's running a fever again? It's just pitiful. I wonder who she takes after. Mother-in-law, what brings you here today? What's the matter? Can a mother visit her son's home? You're such a cold-hearted daughter-in-law. A frail granddaughter and a demon for a daughter-in-law. Lord, if I could only have the post-retirement years that I dreamed of. Yes, the person who's unhappy with our household is my mother-in-law. She frequently visits our home, which is just 3 bus stops away, and constantly spews her classic passive-aggressive remarks. She's enjoyed tormenting me ever since we got married. Now she's also unpleasant towards Hannah. Doesn't she find her own granddaughter adorable? My son never ran a fever this frequently. Amy, isn't this something from your side of the family? Mother-in-law, as I've explained countless times, Hannah's illness isn't hereditary. It's... No, I'm sure your family's genes are playing a role here. I always knew taking you into our family was a bad idea. My mother-in-law seems to be fixated on belittling my family lineage, and her snide remarks never end. Eventually, I've grown accustomed to dealing with her, realizing that arguing is a waste of time. I let out a sigh, grab the freshly made soup, and head to Hannah's room. Hey, I'm not finished talking yet. I could hear her yelling from behind, but I just ignored her. Once I entered Hannah's room, her voice became faint. Grandma came over again, didn't she? Right, same old mother-in-law bashing. No helping it, I guess. Grandma's just... My daughter Hannah lets out a wry smile, but I know she understands. There's no way she can't hear my mother-in-law's loud voice. Yet Hannah never speaks ill of her grandmother. On the contrary, she'll make a guilty face and say, "I'm sorry, Mom, it's because of me." Hannah, it's not your fault at all. She's not at fault in the slightest. Yet Hannah apologizes to me. I don't want her to feel this way, so my husband and I always greet her with smiles. We create a cheerful atmosphere, not wanting her to dwell on negative thoughts. But my mother-in-law destroys that atmosphere in an instant. As I hug Hannah tightly, I bite my lip. Her thin body, so unlike a healthy high school girl. Feeling Hannah's warmth, I feel a sense of relief, but also realize that I must start keeping a distance from my mother-in-law. Days occupied with taking care of my frail daughter. On the rare days she goes to school, I worry nonstop. I took back our house keys from my meddling mother-in-law. Days filled with endless quarrels with my ranting mother-in-law. My husband working hard for our beloved family. My laughing daughter, Hannah. Despite everything, they were peaceful days, and I thought they would last forever. I don't know why I believe that. There's no such thing as forever. Everything that begins must also end. On a rainy summer day, Hannah fell ill. Unrelenting heat. The doctor looked grim as he reviewed the test results. I held my trembling daughter, Hannah, in my arms, and then she was admitted to the hospital. Summer vacation had begun, and by the time it ended, Hannah was still in the hospital, still receiving treatment. Those were incredibly difficult and painful days. Hannah looked like she was suffering so much. Even so, I believed she would recover. She would surely get better. More than anything, Hannah herself believed that. But Hannah passed away. Dad! Mom! I love you! Those were her last words before she embarked on her far-off journey. Looking up at the dreary sky as the autumn rain continued to pour, I was in tears. The tears wouldn't stop. It was raining during the funeral, too. It felt like the sky was crying for me as I was too busy to even shed tears. The tears I shed on the day Hannah passed away have now dried up. I was that busy. My husband, too, had taken time off of work and was rushing around. I was swamped with contacting relatives and Hannah's school. That's the only way I could cope. I couldn't stand it unless I was busy. The loss I felt from losing Hannah was that immense. Many people came to the funeral in the rain. Even though she didn't go to school much, many of her friends came to pay their respects. And they all cried. There were kids who screamed and cried out in disbelief. Some broke down crying, saying they would love her forever. Watching them, I felt a perverse sense of happiness. Everyone loved Hannah. Knowing that she was a child who was so loved, I couldn't help but feel happy. Many people spoke to me. And they all praised Hannah. My parents hugged me as they cried. I couldn't help but break down in tears. It was then that my phone, which was in the pocket of my black funeral attire, vibrated. I had my phone on me in case someone needed directions to our funeral's location, so I quickly stepped away from my seat and looked at the screen. The caller ID showed that it was my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had already passed away, and although I had contacted my mother-in-law, she hadn't come to the hospital. When Hannah was in her final moments, claiming it was impossible because she was far away, she said she couldn't attend the funeral today either because she had something important to do. But I wondered, would she really say she's coming after all? Even someone like her might want to say goodbye to their grandchild. So I answered the phone, but I instantly regretted it. "Amy, what on earth are you doing?" She yelled at me. "Ha! I'm at Hannah's funeral." "What? Stop joking around and get over here right now." "To your place? That's impossible. What are you talking about?" "Right back at you. I told you I had something important to do today, didn't I? Hurry back and help me out." "Ha! I don't have anything more important than my daughter's funeral. Don't nobody care about your business? My plan comes first before anything else." "What on earth is she talking about?" "First of all, as a mother, my daughter's funeral is the most important thing now, and it's wrong of my mother-in-law to not even care about her grandchild's funeral. My mother-in-law had always been adamant about not going to the funeral, no matter what my husband said. Why do I have to help her out with her stuff? If it's more important than your granddaughter's funeral, why don't you handle it yourself? You're my daughter-in-law. You're supposed to help me. I don't understand what you mean. I'm celebrating my super precious daughter's birthday. There's nothing more important than this in the world. Excuse me? I couldn't help but take an extraordinarily long time to respond. Ha! What did she just say? Mother-in-law's daughter, that's my sister-in-law, isn't it? My sister-in-law, Sandy. I remember she lives in some incredibly remote part of the world where the only means of communication is through a phone that hardly ever gets reception. Because of this, while we did send an email about today's funeral, we have no idea when she'll read it. So, what's this about Sandy's birthday? Ha! What about Sandy's birthday exactly? Sandy's coming home after such a long time, and coincidentally, it's her birthday too. We have to celebrate it grandly, don't we? Like I care! So I need to thoroughly clean my house and prepare a huge feast. So come over here fast. But as I said, I'm in the middle of a funeral right now. I don't care about that. My daughter is more important than my granddaughter. Also, bring a present with a budget of over $500. Hurry up! If you don't bring any gift right now, I'll ruin your funeral. Click! I hung up on her. I couldn't stand to listen any longer. If I had to hear any more from my mother-in-law, I felt like I'd march over there with a baseball bat. Just how selfish can my mother-in-law be? Your daughter over your granddaughter? I'm not saying they should be compared, but to say your daughter is more important? More important than a funeral? She must be kidding. I told my husband Mike everything that had happened, and we decided to ignore her. Mike tried to contact Sandy, but either she was still in the plane, or we just couldn't reach her. Pulling myself together and regaining my composure, I returned to shedding tears at my daughter's funeral. The day after the funeral, Sandy visited our place. She read Mike's email and flew here right away. She apparently thought it would be faster to come home than to try to get in touch while traveling from where she lives, but it took her a great time to get here. In the end, she didn't make it to the funeral, Sandy bowing her head in apology. After paying her respects at the altar, she shared various stories with us. There were stories I had never heard before about my daughter and Sandy, who we hardly ever got a chance to see. Listening to that, I found myself reminiscing about my daughter when she was little, and once again, I started to cry. In the end, my mother-in-law didn't even bother to come to pay her respects. My sister-in-law, Sandy, deeply bowed her head and apologized for this. I'll do something about my mom, she said before leaving, but I wonder what she meant by that. Then, a few days later, the reality that my daughter was gone still hadn't sunk in, and I found myself in her room. I gently stroked her study desk. The room, untouched since her death, was filled with so many memories of her. Just as I felt like I was about to cry again, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Startled, I quickly wiped away my tears and was speechless as I looked at the monitor. To my surprise, it was my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law, who had angered both my husband and me with her inappropriate remarks on the day of the funeral. She hadn't even come to pay her respects, and even after a few days had passed, she hadn't shown up. What does she want now? I had no intention of opening the door, so I responded via the intercom. What can I do for you, mother-in-law? Oh, Amy, please help me. Just after I was left puzzled by her unexpected plea for help, I might end up joining my granddaughter if this keeps up. Please help me, she exclaimed, saying something unthinkable. Wondering what was going on, I reluctantly opened the front door, and my mother-in-law fell in. What's going on? Help me! My daughter! My daughter! Ah! While I was tilting my head, not understanding what she was trying to say, a figure suddenly came into my view. Well, here you are, Mom! The figure was Sandy. She had a smiling face, but somehow it gave off a silent pressure. Eek! She's here! Ha! What? What? Seeing the pale face of my mother-in-law, who screamed at the sight of Sandy, I was completely stunned. What on earth is happening? Oh, come on, don't say things like, she's here, it's rude. See, Mom, it's your cute daughter, right? No, 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 not cute at all. What in the world is going on? Just until the other day, she was talking about her daughter and her birthday being more important than my daughter's funeral. What happened in just a matter of a few days? While I stood there, bewildered, Sandy handed something to our mother-in-law. Don't worry, the next part is much easier. Here, you just need to put this on your head and go about your life. Saying this, Sandy put it on my mother-in-law's head. She shook it off and hid behind me. I'm not wearing that. Why not? People will think I'm a weirdo if I walk around with that on my head. Wondering what on earth it was, I looked at the object that had fallen to the floor. It was a mask. Not the kind of mask you would see at a fair, but something, I don't know, a mask that you might see worn by a tribe living deep in Africa during some strange ritual. The kind of thing a shaman might like. And why does Sandy have something like this? Why put it on my mother-in-law's head? This mask is used for fortune-telling where I live. Sandy explained in response to my question. It has an interesting look. It's a great craftwork that has been passed down since ancient times. I was stunned. Well, yeah, looks like it. So you're going to put this mask on top of my mother-in-law's head? Not on her face? If it's on her face, she wouldn't be able to see anything. This isn't an ordinary mask with holes for the eyes. I mean, if it did have holes in them, I wouldn't mind letting her wear it on her face. And what happens when she puts it on? Oh, you didn't know? This mask has a demon-repelling effect. As if I would know about such an effect. A demon repellent? Exactly. You see, no matter how hard you think, she's clearly possessed by a demon, right? With that, Sandy pointed at my mother-in-law, her own daughter, saying such a thing. So this is what she meant by I'll do something about my mom. So if she wears this for a few days, I think she'll definitely become a normal human being with morals. I've been trying several methods for the past few days. A different method? I had her wear a necklace of garlic and run around the neighborhood. Isn't that for vampires, not demons? Or are vampires also demons? I'm not quite sure, but oh well. But what's with the running? Is that why my mother-in-law has been looking so worn out? That must have smelled terrible. Garlic isn't that bad unless you cut it open, you know. That's not really the point, but that's beside the point. The issue is that she wore that and spent a few days that she was running. I really wish I could have seen that scene. Do you want to see the pictures? Oh, yes, please. Sandy has pictures. What a pro! You guys, what are you so happy about? Show a little more sympathy for me. My mother-in-law started to complain as Sandy and I were laughing and looking at the pictures. I almost forgot she was here. Why do we have to show sympathy for you? Sandy looked up from her phone and glared at my mother-in-law. Why? Because you're my daughter. If you want sympathy from your daughter, why don't you become a person deserving of sympathy? Do you think there's anyone else as sincere as I am? Where's the good in someone who dismisses their grandchild's funeral as whatever? Sandy exclaimed, her mouth wide open in anger. When I rushed home and came back for my niece's funeral, I find you here just lounging at home. And when I asked if the funeral was over, you boldly said you didn't go. I thought maybe you were sick, but you were just doing push-ups to show how fit you were. Push-ups? She wouldn't even go light an incense at the wake. I don't care about my birthday. Screw that. What are you talking about? It's a parent's duty to celebrate their child's birthday. I've never heard of a grandmother prioritizing her daughter's birthday over her grandchild's funeral. Their shouting match was getting so intense that Sandy and my mother-in-law were both panting heavily. That's why I'm saying we need to cleanse this rotten character of yours that's like you've been possessed by a demon and start over. Sandy cried out at the end, tears suddenly rolling down her cheeks. It's pitiful that Hannah had a grandmother like you. Her words stuck in my throat. Ah, Sandy loved my daughter too. Even if the time they spent together was short, there was no doubt that Sandy loved my daughter. Holding back the tears that threatened to spill, I stared hard at my mother-in-law. She faltered for a moment under my gaze. Mother-in-law? What is it? You didn't do anything for my daughter when she was alive, did you? And I'm not talking about giving her stuff. You didn't even care about her, did you? So what if I didn't? There's no way I could have doted on such a frail child just because she's my granddaughter. But my daughter, she adored you. Ha! At my unexpected words, my mother-in-law was at a loss for words. I told her to wait a moment and went back into the house. From my daughter's room, I took that and returned to my mother-in-law who was still at the entrance. Then I handed her a letter. What's this? It's a letter from my daughter to you. Eh? My mother-in-law looked back and forth in surprise between me and the letter. In my hand was a letter, certainly addressed to Grandma, in my daughter's handwriting. My mother-in-law tentatively opened it and checked the content. As she read on, her eyes widened and before we knew it, tears were welling up. No! No! I didn't do anything for Hannah. I was never kind to her or showed her love. Crying out, my mother-in-law collapsed to the ground on her knees. Picking up the letter that fell from her hand, my sister-in-law also read it. Sorry for not being a healthy granddaughter. I'll try to be stronger so don't hate me. I love you, Grandma. Hannah, even though she was such an unloving old woman. Hannah was a kind child. Yes, she truly was. At my murmuring, my sister-in-law nodded, tears streaming down her face. Tears wouldn't stop from my eyes either. And then, I'm sorry for being such a terrible grandmother. I'm sorry. Forgive me, Hannah. My mother-in-law was crying her heart out, bowing deep on the ground. The three of us kept crying for a long time. After that, my husband who came home to see us crying was taken aback. My sister-in-law explained briefly and then took my mother-in-law home. Despite her shaky steps, my mother-in-law tightly clutched onto the letter from Hannah. A few days later, my mother-in-law said she wanted to pay her respects at Hannah's memorial portrait, but I firmly declined. However, I told her it would be fine for her to visit the grave after the burial service was over, which is planned once the mourning period concludes. My mother-in-law said quietly over the phone, I'm sorry. No matter how much she reflects and regrets, I can't forgive her cold attitude towards Hannah while she was here and certainly not what happened on the day of the funeral. I plan to continue being almost entirely estranged from her and I guess my mother-in-law has sensed that. The pushy and sly old woman that my mother-in-law was is nowhere to be seen anymore. My sister-in-law went back overseas where she currently lives and my husband keeps contact with my mother-in-law to a bare minimum. My mother-in-law, now leading a lonely life in her old age, has developed dementia. Luckily, we quickly found a retirement home and now she lives there. Of course, I don't visit her and my husband only goes when it's necessary. According to my husband who had to go to the facility recently, my mother-in-law keeps murmuring, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Hannah. Even hearing that, I feel nothing. No matter how many years have passed, I can't forgive her and I don't even want to. But then I think, in my gaze is a picture of Hannah, smiling happily. If it was Hannah, that kind girl, she probably would have forgiven my mother-in-law. No, she probably never even held a grudge in the first place. She was such a kind child. Mom, I love you. I thought I heard her voice. And gently wiped my. Why should I prepare food for you? You're not my bloodline. I don't even call you family. Don't get too comfortable with me. Why are you even here in this house in the first place? I asked my son and granddaughter to come over so I can spend some quality time with my family. Can you leave us alone? Awkwardness filled the living room of my parents-in-law's house. My mother-in-law, who he eliminated every time we saw each other, was a big pain in my neck. But one day... Mommy! Oh my God! It's Grandma! What happened? My blood drained from my face when my panic-stricken daughter told me what happened. My name is Amelia. I married my husband Peter when I was 25 and gave birth to my daughter Olivia when I was 29. I quit my job upon marriage and have been a housewife. I'm 39 now and my happy family of 3 live in a rented apartment. I live a fulfilled life, but there is one big problem. That is Judy, Peter's mother. Her behavior toward me has been the cause of my headache. Frankly speaking, she has been bullying me. She told me herself that she doesn't accept me as the wife of her son. Although she did not outwardly oppose our marriage, I've been snubbed for various reasons from the very beginning. She used to show up unannounced, force herself inside the house, and complain about the way that I did the housework and the taste of my cooking. Before I came pregnant with Olivia, she made unreasonable demands that I have to give birth to a boy. Then she would bring her worn out, tattered clothes to me, saying, she even sent me health-rotten vegetables on COD without my permission. In short, she has done pretty much everything that most people would call baiting. What keeps me sane is that Peter and Olivia are always on my side. Whenever Peter finds me being bullied by Judy, he always intervenes. Olivia tells her, when Judy talks bad about me. When I go to my in-laws' house, she says something sarcastic about me even in front of Brian, my father-in-law. Every time, he scolds her not to say such things. She never minded and continued to torment me as if it was part of her daily routine. One day, Olivia came home from school with a gloomy look on her face. Normally, she cheerfully shouted at the front door, but she was silent. She brushed it off, but continued to look as if she was in a state of deep thought after that. She was always smiling and cheerful, so they bothered me very much. I knew she was at a sensitive age and didn't want to pester her, but I couldn't just leave it at that. Peter had to work late that day, so there was going to be just the two of us at dinner. I thought she would talk to me then. When she was slowly eating her bottle of mac and cheese, I started the conversation. I'm worried about you. When you say you're okay, it's often not the case. I'll never tell anyone and won't get angry. No matter what happens, I'm always on your side. Can you tell me what happened? She put down the fork and remained silent for a while. Then, she made up her mind and opened her mouth. She began to explain as articulately as a 10-year-old could. She went to play with her friends at her house, which was a 15-minute drive from ours, after school. She sometimes went there, and her friend's mom drove her back afterward. On the way home, when the car stopped at the traffic lights, she saw Judy working arm in arm with a young man she didn't know. She even saw them kissing. As soon as she realized it was her grandmother, she ducked down not to be seen. I couldn't believe my ears at that completely unexpected story. The idea of her being affectionate with another man in plain sight, close to her relief, was so abominable. It must have been traumatizing to witness such a scene for a 10-year-old. I soothed her and suggested she take an aroma bath. In the meantime, I went to the corner grocer and brought her favorite ice cream. Normally, I would not give her sweets before bed, but it was unlike any other day. She was looking gloomy for a long time, but she cheered up a little upon seeing the package, and by the time she finished eating, she was almost back to her normal self. Still, I knew her innocent heart was broken. I told myself to keep a close eye on her for a while. Then, Peter came home tired from work less than half an hour after Olivia went to sleep. I thought it was crude to tell him that his mother was having an affair with a young man, but I could not keep it from him. I taught him exactly what Olivia had told me. He was enjoying his beer in the living room, but when he heard the story, he covered his mouth with a hand and ran to the kitchen. He came back with a wobbly step and mumbled weakly. Seriously? I could feel his pain and disgust. When he calmed down, we discussed our plans. What are we going to do about it? Shouldn't we let Brian know? Well, we can't just leave it like this. If we were to tell him we need to gather more evidence, I worry that she could make excuses if we only have Olivia's story. I agreed with him. We decided to ask a private investigator to look into Judy's infidelity. I was impressed by the work of a professional. The investigator gathered the evidence photos in no time after I requested them. There was a picture of Judy, dressed inappropriately of her age, embracing a young man. It was a sight I didn't want to see, but I had no choice but to confirm it. The investigator also found the identity of the young man. He was a college student who actively looked for older women. Judy had been contributing a considerable amount of money to him. There was also a photo of them entering a designer's brand boutique. It didn't look like adultery, but rather she was being swindled by the young man. Anyway, there was no doubt of infidelity, and she must have been aware that it was cheating on her part. We got concrete evidence to trap her in. We weren't going to let her get away with it. The only thing left was when to tell Brian. While Peter and I were waiting for the right moment, Judy called him asking him to come over on the weekend. That was great timing. If I went there, she would most likely find a way to bully me. I was certain of that from my past experiences. If that were the case, I could expose everything then. Who would be laughing in the end? The weekend had arrived. I was usually depressed about visiting Judy, but I couldn't wait to see her that day. I could finally reveal her misdeeds. While I was imagining this and that, my family and I arrived at my in-laws' house. As soon as we parked the car, Judy opened the front door with a smile on her face. "Oh, you're here! Hi, Peter and Olivia. Welcome. I've prepared a delicious lunch and it's waiting for you. Come on in." As I had expected, her bullying started right away. She acted as if I were not there. She turned her back on me and didn't make eye contact. Even though I was annoyed by her boldness, I tried to think it wasn't a big deal and called myself. Peter was about to say something to her, but I stopped him. We needed to be patient. It wasn't better to let her carry on with it and then knock her down. When we were in the living room, Brian was sitting on the sofa, watching TV. "Oh, Amelia, Olivia, and Peter. Welcome. Nothing exciting here, but make yourself at home." He always called my name first. It might have been nothing to him, but it always made me very happy. As I exchanged greetings with him, Judy happily said, "We got a delivery for lunch. Come on, let's eat together. I'm sure the food is delicious." She laid out the plates on the dining table. The lunch was Thai food. There was a papaya salad, pad thai, green curry, tom yum soup, and so on. They sure looked delicious, but I was allergic to coriander. Judy, of course, knew that. "You know, Judy, I'm allergic to coriander, right? I'm sorry, but I can't eat most of them." She answered, I know that dismissively. Then words began to pour from her lips. I thought a dame inside her had broken. "I don't need you to tell me what you're allergic to. I didn't count you in for lunch anyway. My family is only 4 of us. Brian, Peter, Olivia, and me. Why should I prepare food for you? Why are you even here? I invited Peter and Olivia to come over. What an inconsiderate person you are." She was unstoppable. "Let me make this clear, Amelia. You should be ashamed of yourself for being a half-hearted housewife who doesn't even do housework and sits idle all day long. You shouldn't just take advantage of the kind and hardworking Peter. I mean, you don't work and you neglect your housework. What do you do all day every day? You're not having an affair with some guy, are you? Who knows? Me? Having an affair? Who was talking?" Peter, who was standing next to me, gave out a groan of dismay. Well, it was about time. I couldn't believe she brought up the perfect subject herself. I asked Peter if I could bring it up. He nodded enthusiastically. Not only had she been nasty to me, but she had traumatized Olivia. I was going to make her pay for all of that. I took out the photo evidence from my bag and handed it not to Judy but to Brian. They looked at the pictures in confusion. At first, both of them seemed not to understand what they are looking at. But as soon as they realized, their faces changed color. Brian's turned red and Judy's turned white. I was amazed by the contrast. "What are these?" "As you see, Judy's having an affair with this young man. Olivia saw them together. She suspected me of having an affair, but it seems she was just talking about herself." "No, that's not true. I'm not having an affair with Justin. It's purely..." Judy was so panicked that she blurted out the young man's name. Brian got angrier and shouted, "Who's Justin? I heard you brought a lot of things for him. A total of about a couple of thousand?" "No, I think it's more like a couple of 10,000. You're a housewife too, so where in the world did that money come from? It can't be the money Brian has earned, can it? Oh, you're so bad. You shouldn't take advantage of his kindness." I took the opportunity to press hard on her. Judy was horrified and even thought her mouth was moving. No word came out of it. She probably never thought that I would talk back to her. "Mom, Dad's been so good to you, hasn't he? Why do you have to cheat on him? I'm ashamed of you for not only bullying Amelia, but doing unspeakable things behind his back. You don't love Grandpa? I feel sorry for him. I don't like you, Grandma." Peter and Olivia was blaming her harshly. I knew something was fishy. "You've been sneaking out day and night lately. I checked your bank account and found that you had been withdrawing little by little. I never thought that you were having an affair with such a young man." Brian shook his head in disbelief. Pushed to the edge, Judy somehow rebounded and lifted her chin in defiance. "What I do is none of your business. I will live my life the way I want to." Brian erupted with anger at her attitude and shouted at her to get out of the house. His fury didn't subside after that, and the two ended up filing for divorce. Judy had no income and no savings, so she could no longer contribute to her beloved Justin. He simply abandoned her. How did I find out? Judy told me herself. She was so desperate that she turned to us and stormed into our house. She hoped that we sympathized with her if we knew her devastation. I only have you to rely on, Peter. I can't get in touch with Justin anymore. Please, I apologize to you too, Amelia. I don't trust you anymore. Why don't you just live your life the way you want to? Like you said before, not my business." Of course, we had no sympathy for her. I would never forgive her for traumatizing Olivia. Eventually, we called the police to remove her. Brian had gone around telling all the relatives that Judy had an affair and that she bullied me, so she couldn't rely on them either. I heard that she was living alone in a shabby apartment and continued to pay alimony. She has truly brought this on herself. On the other hand, Brian decided to move in with us since he became alone. He's better with children than I expected. He takes Olivia to various places on weekends. Olivia also enjoys hanging out with him and seems to be gradually forgetting about Judy. Furthermore, he's helping me with the housework, saying he feels bad for living rent-free. In the beginning, I had to teach him step by step. Now, he can do everything by himself and even cooks dinner for us. Thanks to him, I'm able to go out and work part-time. It took me a while to get used to working after a long break, but I enjoy being outside the home. I'm even thinking about getting a certification in something. Since Brian has moved in with us, I can feel the quality of our life improving. He protected me when Judy bullied me and is still supporting me in many ways. Judy was truly an idiot to betray such a nice man. I learned from her mistake not to indulge immediate greed and to be grateful for the happiness. I cooked all the food by myself tonight. My daughter-in-law didn't do anything. I can't understand why Mike married this useless failure who can't do anything. Why would you say that? You're terrible. While I was getting shot by what she said, all the relatives burst out laughing. Haha, what on earth are you talking about, Mom? My mother-in-law seemed to be confused. Actually, there was a reason why everybody was laughing. My mother-in-law was the only one who didn't know. My name is Macy. I'm 31 years old and I'm married. I got married when I was 27 years old and I got pregnant soon after. I have a 4-year-old daughter and she goes to kindergarten now. I live with my husband who is a year older than me and my daughter. Mommy, the food is delicious today. My daughter, Mia, said happily while she was eating dinner. Glad to hear that. I smiled and said, my hobby is cooking and I usually prepare foods or try to find new recipes while my free time. I recently started working part-time as a housekeeper to make good use of my skills. When my daughter started attending kindergarten, I became able to work in the daytime and my life became fulfilled. Not only I can assist with living expenses by working, but also I love the feeling of being connected with people by doing something that I'm good at. I need to think of a recipe for the next housekeeping service, I thought, and took out my phone. Then, I saw the notification saying that I had 25 new text messages. I had a bad feeling. As I had anticipated, all the messages were from my mother-in-law. I've turned off the notification sound on my phone so I only check my messages when I activate my screen. My in-laws live in a city nearby and it takes 1.5 hours to get there by car. I wanted to keep a comfortable distance from my in-laws and my husband showed understanding in it. But my mother-in-law kept saying to me, "Stop making excuses, just come to help us. You're living on Mike's income. It's not possible for you to be occupied with your part-time job. When do you plan on coming to do the housework? Isn't Mia already in kindergarten? You must have a lot of free time. What are you doing at home? Mia talks too much just like you. I hope you'll have a boy next time." All the texts were these kind of depressing messages. Why does she have to send me the messages that will make me unhappy? I sighed and flopped onto the couch. "Are you all right, Mommy?" With a concerned look, my daughter glanced at my face. Then, my husband came home. "I'm back." I was overwhelmed by the large number of complaints that my mom sent me. "Did she send them to you too, Macy?" he asked me, but when he saw my exhausted face, he seemed to have understood. "I knew that you got them too. You know that my mom is such a moody person, so don't worry about it too much." "Okay." She has been asking me to help with the housework at her house, but their house is not that close and I also have a job, so I guess it's difficult for me. "You don't have to go. I'll tell her by myself too. If we lived closer, it would have been much worse. I haven't told my mother-in-law that I'm working as a housekeeper yet. I only told her that I have a part-time job. If I tell her the truth, I can easily imagine what she would say. Besides, I'm worried about another thing. My mother-in-law doesn't seem to have much love towards my daughter. It seems that she wanted to have a grandson instead, and she didn't even send gifts to Mia when she was born or entered kindergarten. Even if she is acting like that, she still wants me to do the housework for her. To be honest, I don't feel like helping her even though she is the mother of my husband. Thanks, Mike. We have our own life. Wait me for a while. I'll warm up your food." After he came home, I started feeling better. I stayed in the kitchen in high spirits and tried to forget about the messages I read earlier. But one day after a while, my husband talked to me hesitantly. "Macy, I know you won't be happy, but I got a message about the annual dinner party on July weekend, and they're going to have it at my parents' house this year." "Oh, really?" "Maybe they couldn't make a reservation at the restaurant in a hotel we usually use." "I got it." To tell the truth, I prefer meeting the mean mother-in-law outside. She likes showing off, so she usually acts like a very caring person in front of other people. However, if we are going to have a family party at their house, it might be different, I thought. On the day of the party, "Good morning, Beth. Come here, Mia, and say hello to your grandma. Come quickly." When we arrived at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law didn't even look at her granddaughter and said bluntly, "By the way, you and I are in charge of making the dinner today, so be prepared." She said to me with an evil smile, "Oh, is it? Okay. Beth, can I help you?" My brother-in-law's wife asked her, but she said, "It's okay. You should keep playing with Tommy." My mother-in-law adored her grandson, Tommy. "Mia, go and play with Tommy." "Yes. Tommy, Grandpa, let's play." "Glad to see you, Mia." My father-in-law picked her up while he was smiling happily. He loves his granddaughter, Mia. I was relieved when I saw my daughter playing happily. My mother-in-law and I went into the kitchen. "Please don't come to the kitchen while we are preparing." My mother-in-law reminded everyone. Why would she do that? I was suspicious of her, but I decided to focus on cooking. I'm confident in my cooking skills. People praise me at work, and I'm getting more and more businesses. I thought to myself and cheered up myself. My mother-in-law was watching me while me starting preparing. She was just watching me, and she didn't look like she was going to do something at all. Oh my, you shouldn't do that. Don't you even know how to use the knives? That's so clumsy. Isn't that because you've been eating too much packed food? I know it's convenient, but you shouldn't do that. Gosh, you don't even know the basics of seasoning? I feel bad for Mike. I wonder how bad the food is he's been getting from you. She only complained and never helped me with cooking. I was feeling awkward, but I just said yes to her and tried to work efficiently. I know that my mother-in-law is hard to deal with. If I make her upset now, I don't know how it would affect my daughter and my husband. I decided to hold myself in for them. My mother-in-law kept complaining, but when she tasted the dish I cooked, she nodded approvingly. Good, maybe it suited her taste. I was relieved. Thank you for waiting. The dinner is ready. She called out to relatives with a big smile on her face. I was so exhausted because I made all the food for 10 people and set them on the dishes all by myself. However, I tried to see things better by thinking that it was a challenge for me to improve my skills. Wow, the plating is amazing. It looks like a dish from a fine restaurant. Can I take a picture? The flavor is rich and it's so delicious. This can be served in the restaurant. Wow, this is so good and fancy. Mommy, I want to have this at home too. The relatives were all enjoying the food and it made me happy. I thought I could start a catering service for a large group. You're right. This is really good. There are even some dishes which go well with drinks. Yes, I heard that you like drinking and you prefer this kind of dish instead of a regular dinner. When I said that, I'm glad that you're enjoying it. It makes all my effort worthwhile. My mother-in-law said in a louder voice and cut me off. What? She was just watching and complaining. I was stunned. Wait, didn't you make this with Macy? My father-in-law looked confused. No, she didn't do anything. She was just watching and put them on the table after I made it. My mother-in-law said it shamelessly and continued. I can't understand why Mike married this useless failure who can't do anything. This is too much. I knew that she was mean and she had a sharp tongue, but I found it hard to believe that she would make such a statement, especially after making me do all the work. I was speechless with anger. What are you talking about? At that moment, they burst out laughing. My husband, my husband's brother, his wife, and my husband's uncle were all laughing hard. Did everyone hear that? My husband asked his relatives while he was laughing. My in-laws were surprised. Mom, stop joking around. Everybody knows that you didn't make this. He laughed so hard that he let out tears and said while rubbing his eyes. What are you talking about? I made this all by myself. My mother-in-law yelled. It can't be. Maybe you didn't notice, but you have a really bad sense of taste and you always make the same food. It's impossible for you to make this tasty dish all of a sudden. My husband said straightforwardly. That's right. I've eaten the food that you made before, but it didn't have a flavor. Maisie has made me some food before and it was just as good as the dinner tonight. I can tell that she made the dinner tonight. My father-in-law's brother agreed. Yeah, my mom's food is always dry and doesn't have a taste. I was disappointed when my mom told me that we were having dinner at her house tonight, but I ended up having amazing food. Thank you, Maisie. My brother-in-law agreed as well. All the relatives said that the food she makes is not good. My mother-in-law lost face and she pointed her anger to me. Hey, Maisie, you never come and make a dinner for us, but you went to my brother-in-law's house and made dinner for him? What's up with that? She glared at me and blamed. I went to his house for my housekeeping service. His house is within my service area. I told her the truth. If you pay me the fee, I'll come to your house too. I said so even though I felt a little bit bad because she called me a failure earlier. What? Fee? You, a daughter-in-law, shouldn't say that. If you have time to do the housework for strangers, you should do it at your in-law's house and be useful. You should never ask for money from it. I knew that she would say something like this if she finds out that I'm working as a housekeeper. It was exactly the same as I had imagined. When she was yelling at me about something old-fashioned like this, my husband cited me. The reason why we can send you money is because Maisie is making money with the housekeeping service. That's right! I've been sending half of my salary to her. What do you mean by sending us money? I don't know anything about it. What? Didn't you know about it? Mom told us that your salary had decreased and you can't pay for the loan for renovating the bathroom. She was begging, so Maisie has been helping her. What? What did you tell them? My salary hasn't changed and we don't have a loan for the renovation. What the hell did you use the money for, Bev? Being accused by my father-in-law, Bev turned pale. She looked down and didn't answer, so he said, "You have asked me about stocks before. Did you use the money for that?" She gasped. Actually, she started talking little by little. Actually, I had tried to invest on the stocks, but I didn't do well and I took a large loss. To cover it up, I asked Mike and Maisie to send me some money. What? Why did you do that without telling me about it? He yelled, "Mom, I didn't know that you had been lying to us. You didn't even try to get a job and you just made us pay for it. Maisie sent you the money she earned and you call her useless? How did you dare do that?" My husband couldn't hold back his anger and yelled, "I'm sorry." She apologized in a very faint voice. "You're apologizing to the wrong person. Maisie, Mia, let's just go home," he said angrily, and he got us out of their house. On our way home, he said to me while he was driving, "Maisie, I'm so sorry that you had to go through a hard time because of my mom. You don't have to send her money anymore, okay?" Seeing him apologizing while frowning, I couldn't help laughing. "Okay, I'll stop sending then." My mother-in-law's words hurt me so much, but I was feeling a lot better by his words. A few days later, my father-in-law also called me to apologize as well. "Maisie, I'm so sorry about the other day. My wife was tricked by a guy who she met through a dating app and seems to have lost a lot of money. To cover that up, she tried to make money with the investment and she failed. She wanted to hide it from me, but she didn't want to work either. That's why she lied to you guys and made you send her money. It was a dating app. It wasn't just a loss from the investment, but the real reason was worse." That made me speechless. However, what I heard next was even worse. I always gave Bev some money for Mia so she can give some gifts to Mia on her birthdays. However, it seems like she was using the money also for the guy. I'm really sorry for that. Oh, really? I never knew that. I thought it was because you didn't like her. I didn't care so much about who gave the money to who and who didn't, but I was more shocked by the fact that she has been using the money for her granddaughter for herself. I was disgusted by it. I only drink and eat some appetizers at home, so I didn't really notice that the food my wife cooks is bad, but I can't believe she had the nerve to speak to you in that manner. He cleared his throat and said seriously, "I'm considering ending my marriage with her. After she gets kicked out of the house, she might go to your house thinking that you guys would help, so please be careful." After this warning call from my father-in-law, we quickly made some arrangements for moving. We've been actually talking about moving for a while, and we're already interested in one house, so all we needed to do was sign in a contract. We have to get away from my mom. My husband was very serious. He was also shocked by the fact that his mother has been using the money for me and for herself. I have to protect my family. He seemed to have made a decision. We signed the contract and asked them to do the things quickly, and we were able to move into our new house 2 weeks later. A few days later, my mother-in-law called my husband. "Hey Mike, I'm here at your house, but when I rang the bell, a stranger answered the door. What's going on? You should have told me if you have moved. I'm your mother." I heard her angry voice over his phone. "The people from the management company must be coming and going at our old apartment." My husband replied calmly, "Yes, we've moved. I didn't tell you because I have no intention to see you ever again. I don't want the mother who would trick and take the money from us to stay close to my family." He said it clearly and ended the call. Mike, are you all right? After he hung up, he was sitting down on the couch with an exhausted face. I got worried and asked him, even if she is a horrible person, she is his mother. It's understandable. Are you all right, Daddy? Our daughter was worried as well and she looked into his face. I'm okay, sweetie. Come here, Mia. He sat and picked her up. Now that I don't have to send money to your mother, I can start saving money for Mia. I'm thinking about opening a bank account under her name. I said to him, trying to make it sound as cheerful as possible. I still can't forget what my mother-in-law said to me. Failure. Useless. Those mean words keep coming back to my head out of nowhere and it wrenches my heart. But it's okay. My husband understands my feeling and I have something that I want to protect. I'm going to make a new recipe for the job tomorrow. Saying that, I stood up and headed. All right then, watch the back for me, okay? You are good, still good, a little more, My mother-in-law said that she was going to park the pickup truck, but she actually backed her car straight at me. She said that she accidentally stepped on the gas instead of the brake pedal, but one small mistake could have led to a major accident. Does she realize that? Well, if it's a mistake, there's nothing I can do about it. I thought that way, but she kept doing the same thing again and again and she hit me really hard at the fourth time, and I ended up with cracked ribs. Enough already! What the heck does she think I am? My patience was reaching its limit, but a few days later. Kaya! I've had enough, so I didn't go to help my mother-in-law with parking, but she ended up crashing into a shed. She was asking for help, but it was time for me to get back at her. I just packed my things and left. I am a housewife and I also work. I live in Tokyo with my husband. We met through work, and because we had a great chemistry, we got married right after we started dating. After we got married, we were living a normal married life, but one day, a year into our marriage, my husband called me out of the blue. What is the important thing you wanted to tell me? Actually, my dad has passed away, so my mom is left alone. What? Your father has passed away? Today, my mom called me while I was at work. I'm going to see her now, but we might have to live with her from now on. With your mother? Well, I'll explain everything in detail later. I was really shocked that my father-in-law has passed away, but he was quite old and had been ill, so it wasn't unexpected. It was inevitable, but I had two concerns. The first concern was that my husband might become emotionally down due to his father's passing, and second concern was that there is a possibility of us living with my mother-in-law in the future. Though I had these worries, I had no time to dwell on them as I was busy with funeral preparations and other matters. Starting next week, we'll be living with my mom. I'll take over my dad's company, and you'll become a full-time housewife to support my mom. Please take care of her. Ha! Moving! It's already decided? I have to take over my dad's company, and also it would be difficult for my mom if she lived alone. Although my husband didn't seem overly saddened by his father's passing, as for the other concern about living with my mother-in-law, it went as expected. Supporting my mother-in-law after losing her husband might be a family duty, but I had a reason why I can't be positive about it. That is my mother-in-law's bullying. She opposed our marriage, and even after we got married, every time I visited my in-laws' house, she bullied me in a way so that nobody else can see it, and the memory of those days came back to me. Despite my reservations, we went ahead with moving to my in-laws' house. Hello! I hope we get along. You're so late. Oh! You didn't bring any gift? Gift? You're going to live here, and you didn't even bring a single gift? I didn't know that you had no common sense. I'm sorry. I understood what my mother-in-law was saying, but we had to move suddenly, and I had barely slept while packing our belongings. We had to sell large furniture and appliances, and it took time to dispose of them. I didn't have any time to buy gifts. I don't know if she didn't understand that, or if she made such remarks knowing the situation. From the first day of moving in, I wasn't in a great mood. I had to quit my job, and from now on, I have to spend the daytime alone with my mother-in-law. I couldn't imagine what kind of life it would be, and I had absolutely no positive expectations, but in a bad way, my predictions were not betrayed at all. I expect you to take care of all the household chores and cooking from now on. All of them? Of course! Why would I do the housework instead of you? I have to support my son's work, so I don't have time to do chores. Understood! But just because I'm not here, don't you dare slack off. If I find out you're slacking even a bit, you'll regret it. It felt as if I was becoming the household's exclusive housekeeper. I am your son's wife. Wouldn't it be better if we tried to build a better relationship? Maybe she doesn't like me, but the decision to live with my mother-in-law was made by my husband and her. So, I thought she didn't have to be so hostile towards me. However, to avoid further complaints from her, I tried my best to do the household chores diligently. Yet, my mother-in-law's demands went far beyond my expectations. Why haven't you cleaned the shed outside yet? It's your job, isn't it? The shed! It's become like a storage dump, so hurry up and clean it. Also, wash the pickup truck while you're at it. All right! I'll try to finish the household chores earlier tomorrow to do it. Tomorrow? Do it today! You don't need any rest, right? You're an ugly woman who can't even do household chores properly, so you should work like a slave for us. It's already past 8 in the evening, and if I start washing the truck and cleaning the shed now, I wouldn't be able to finish even by tomorrow morning. My husband is indifferent even after he saw his mother and me in this situation. There was no one who would help me in this house, so I had to obey my mother-in-law. I never expected my husband to not stand by my side like this, and I was stunned by the extent of my mother-in-law's bullying. If this is how it was going to turn out, I should have never accepted to live with her. I deeply regretted my decision. Since then, my mother-in-law has been making me redo the housework over and over, and she has also given me physically demanding tasks. My life was miserable. One day, she called out to me, "Hey! Come here for a moment. I want to park my pickup truck, so can you watch the back for me?" Okay. My mother-in-law has been using the company's pickup truck as if it were her own car. Usually, she parks it herself, so why did she ask me to help today? Well, there was no point in questioning that. I went out as she asked and was helping her park the truck. Then, suddenly the truck in reverse came straight at me. Ouch! What are you doing? I just mistook the gas and brake pedals. There's no need to get so angry. But it was extremely dangerous. It's just a scratch. You're making a big deal out of nothing. What do you mean nothing? One small mistake could have led to a terrible accident. Yet, she showed no remorse, smirking while saying that. I was about to lose my temper, but I managed to restrain myself. However, from that day on, similar harassment continued multiple times. Can you assist me with parking today as well? Understood. Lately, you've been making quite a few mistakes, so please be careful not to get confused with the brake and accelerator. If you make the same mistake again, I recommend that you return your license. Ha! Are you making fun of me? I don't mean that, but I do mean that you need to be careful. When you misstep on the brake and accelerator, it could lead to a serious accident with injuries or worse. Enough with the nagging. Just take your position. I couldn't let this harassment continue without doing anything, and I decided to express my thoughts, adding some sarcasm. My mother-in-law became instantly displeased, but I didn't care. I thought it would be fine if this stops her from harassing me, but it didn't turn out that way. Here I come! Kia! She backed up the truck with tremendous force, far surpassing her previous harassments. While in the past, she would stop just before hitting me or a small bump, this time, she rammed into me with great impact, and I ended up being slammed onto the shed behind me. I couldn't take a defensive stance at all, and the rear of the truck hit my ribs directly, causing excruciating pain. It hurts! I need to go to the hospital. What? It was just a minor collision. Your reaction is so exaggerated. Please! It hurts! Are you trying to play the tragic heroine? If you're so good at acting, why don't you get hit by a luxury car and claim compensation? You can make some money and you can become useful that way, right? After she said while smirking, my mother-in-law went back inside the house, leaving me behind. I was in so much pain that I couldn't get up from the spot, and cold sweat poured out of me. However, I managed to call a taxi somehow, and I was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, there was no bleeding, and though I had severe pain, I was still able to walk, so I didn't need an ambulance. However, I was diagnosed with a fractured rib at the hospital. I never thought it would be such a serious injury, and my anger towards my mother-in-law reached its peak. What does she think I am? I am not a toy that the wretched woman can play with. I will never forgive her, I thought, but I had to stay in the hospital for a while. Thankfully, my mother-in-law never visited me at the hospital, so I didn't have to see the face of someone I didn't like. However, I was discharged after 1 week, and went back to my in-laws' house. Regarding this incident, how do you intend to take responsibility? I won't let this slide. Taking responsibility? What are you talking about? Isn't that my line? Because you decided to get hospitalized on your own, who do you think did all the household chores this past week? And my son didn't even come to see you, did he? He was angry too, you know? Is that so? Is that your instruction to him? I didn't tell him not to visit you, but he was complaining that there was no one to cook meals for him. Besides, I told him that it was an accident due to your instruction mistake. He might scold you when he comes back. Even though my mother-in-law's malicious actions led to my injury and hospitalization, it seemed she had no intention of reflecting on it at all. My husband didn't come to see me either, and I couldn't understand what he was thinking. I can't live with this family anymore. I am sick and tired of living in this house with such awful people. Well then, I'm going to see my son for a bit. You probably haven't fully recovered yet, but please continue to take care of the household chores as usual. My mother-in-law said, and she left the house smirking as usual. I heard the engine sound of the pickup truck and knew she was about to leave. I was thinking that this was my chance to gather my belongings, leaving only the divorce papers, and get out of here. And that's when I heard a terrible scream from her parking spot. Ouch! Accompanying the scream was the sound of something collapsing with a crash. Wondering what had happened, I hurried to the parking spot while holding my ribs. There, I saw my mother-in-law, who had crashed the pickup truck into the shed. What? What are you doing? Did you take some drugs and hallucinate me? Or have you gone senile and really misstepped on the brake and the accelerator? Shut up! Hurry! Help! Do you think I'm going to help you? You left without helping me. Moreover, as for this, it's your own fault. I never thought you'd become an elderly person who would misstep the brake and the accelerator. I don't want to hear a joke. Perhaps she had really mistaken the brake and the accelerator. She had hit with considerable force, and the front windshield was shattered, leaving the truck in a terrible state. But why did she think I would help her? My mother-in-law left me without helping me in a similar situation. She showered me with horrible insults and left me, so there is no reason for me to help her. She wouldn't be able to complain even if I don't help her because she did the same to me. When you drive next time, make sure not to misstep the brake and the accelerator and run over someone. It would be a hassle if you were sued for compensation. Well, I handled it on my own in a similar situation, so you handle it on your own too. I said and returned to my room, leaving my mother-in-law. Then, I quickly packed my belongings and left the in-laws' house. I could hear some groaning-like voice from the parking spot, but I ignored it completely. However, I wouldn't feel comfortable if I just leave her and something happens to her, so I told my husband. I went to my parents' house, and while I was telling my parents everything that had happened, my husband called me. Hey! My mom's surgery has just finished and she is resting now, but are you fucking kidding me? What are you thinking leaving her like that? What was I thinking? You shouldn't be complaining because she did the same thing to me. I was hit by a pickup truck that she was driving and I ended up having a broken rib and she left without helping me on top of that. It's okay that I didn't help her, right? Besides, I contacted you before leaving, which was more than what your mom did for me. That's not the fucking issue. You don't have a trace of humanity, do you? My husband seemed quite angry about the whole series of events, but isn't he getting angry at a wrong person? I reported him when the incident happened so nothing really bad would happen to her, so he should be grateful if anything. Why the hell are you getting so angry with me? You should be blaming your own mother. Of course I'm furious. Because of this injury, my mother might end up in a wheelchair. Her leg was fractured in a strange shape and she might have some paralysis. Is that so? So what? It's none of my business, though. Don't mess with me. If you had taken her to the hospital properly, maybe there wouldn't have been any problem. Don't you feel any responsibility? Responsibility? Why is he trying to push all this onto me? When I was hospitalized, they didn't even come to visit me. Whatever the reason may be, his own wife had broken bone because of his mother, so isn't it normal for him to come to visit me in the hospital and apologize? I don't want to hear about responsibility from someone who can't even do that. If you're going to talk about responsibility, then shouldn't your mother also take responsibility? What do you mean? As a matter of fact, your mother caused me injury. However, since she was driving your company's truck, maybe you are the one who should take the responsibility. When I said that, my husband fell silent on the phone. I could feel his agitation even over the phone. You sound flustered. Are you getting scared because I suddenly mentioned the responsibility? It's the same as what you were just telling me, isn't it? And you asked me to take responsibility, but I didn't do anything to your mother. This accident was entirely her fault, right? Even though it was a pickup truck, it should have had a rear drive recorder. All the evidence should be there, right? Well, just wait a minute, Wait! What do I have to wait for? No matter how much you think or make excuses, the facts won't change, so there's no point in struggling. As I firmly stated that, my husband fell silent again. Since it was pointless to talk to such a person any further, I hung up the phone and blocked his number. And the next week, I informed them that I would be claiming compensation for my mother-in-law and my husband's company. My mother-in-law had been using my husband's company car, and the incident happened after she delivered parts for his factory, so it was during work hours. Soon after, I received a call from my mother-in-law's number. Hello! I saw the compensation claim documents earlier, but what's the meaning of this? There's no way I can pay that. That's right! Moreover, my company has nothing to do with it. We're family. Are you kidding me? Family or not, that doesn't matter. You need to take responsibility for what you've done. And causing such a serious injury to a family member like breaking their bones. That's just unacceptable, don't you think? I don't consider someone like that as family. I said and hung up the phone again. I had no intention of interacting with them anymore, so I blocked my mother-in-law's number as well. I made sure there was no way for them to get in touch with me, and I left the rest to the lawyer. After that, thanks to the efforts of my lawyer, I received compensation from both my mother-in-law and my husband's company. We also got divorced, and I cut ties with them completely. They know where I live, which is my parents' house, but we requested a no-contact order during the divorce. So if they tried to approach me, I would report them to the police immediately. Maybe they know that and there has been absolutely no contact from them since then. In addition, because we lived in a rural area, news of the incident spread rapidly, and the performance of my ex-husband's company declined. Furthermore, the rumors that she had bullied her daughter-in-law and even caused her serious injury has spread in my mother-in-law's neighborhood, and they are feeling quite uncomfortable. This rumor was true, so my ex-husband and his mother couldn't deny it. Also, because they had to pay me a substantial amount of compensation, they had no savings. They couldn't sell their old and poorly located family home either. The company's performance kept declining, and they kept losing money, so they didn't have any money to spare. In the end, even though they wanted to move because they were feeling really uncomfortable due to their neighbors, they couldn't even leave that place. On top of the company's declining performance, it became difficult for my ex-husband to go to work because he had to take care of his mother who was now in a wheelchair. In just 6 months after the incident, the company went bankrupt. The company my ex-husband inherited from his father was a subcontractor at the factory, and it was a company that was not essential to their clients. As a result, many clients decided to sever ties with them and look for other options. After that, they've had no money, and the neighbors have looked at them with disdain. My ex-husband has to take care of his mother every day. Both of them have been living a stressful life. By the way, my injuries have fully healed, and now I live happily with my family thanks to the compensation I received. It's true that what you need in life is a reliable relationship like a family that supports you. The sound of Alex's voice sliced through the clatter of dishes like a sharp knife. Ilara, bring me some tea, now! I paused, my hands submerged in soapy water. Hold on! I'm doing the dishes! What? His tone was incredulous, laced with impatience. Stop that, and bring me the tea, quickly! Can't you follow simple orders? But, I started, only to be interrupted. What a useless wife you are! Make me some sweet coffee, please! It was Mrs. Whitmore, my mother-in-law, speaking from the living room. She sat there, devouring a slice of cake she'd taken from the fridge, her eyes glinting with malice. I sighed, glancing at the mountain of dishes. There are so many! Leave them for later! Just do what we say, useless wife! Alex's voice was a whip, each word stinging. I was Ilara, a 28-year-old working mother, trapped in a life that felt more like a prison than a home. Married at 23, I had hoped for love and companionship. Instead, I found myself in the clutches of Alex and his overbearing mother. Our son, only 4, was the sole source of joy in my bleak world. We lived in Alex's parents' house, a decision forced upon me under the guise of caring for Mrs. Whitmore after my father-in-law's passing. Initially, I sympathized with her supposed grief, but soon it became clear that I was nothing more than a pawn in her cruel game of domestic tyranny. Cooking, cleaning, working, it was never enough. My efforts were met with scorn. My meals left untouched or criticized harshly. The stir-fry is so half-hearted, Mrs. Whitmore would scoff. Cook it properly from scratch. I'm busy and can only make simple things, I'd respond, trying to keep my voice steady. That's why I hate backtalk from a daughter-in-law, she'd snap. Cook from scratch? Why don't you cook then? You're a good cook, right? I dared to retort once, immediately regretting it. Why would I do housework when you're here? Her response was cold, dismissive. Are you out of your mind? Their cruelty escalated over time, shifting from harsh words to a chilling silence. They began to ignore me completely, as if I were a ghost haunting my own home. My presence, once merely undervalued, now seemed entirely invisible. 5 years passed in this suffocating atmosphere. Alex and I turned 35 and 33, respectively. Our son grew. Yet the oppressive air in the house remained unchanged. My mother-in-law, now 63, seemed to thrive on my misery. One evening, as I trudged home from work, a heavy realization settled over me. My existence seemed pointless in their eyes. I was a shadow, unseen and unheard. The only voice that acknowledged me was that of my son. The thought of losing even that small recognition was unbearable. Returning home, I began cooking immediately, trying to push away the gloom. I prepared mapo tofu, fried chicken, and a stir-fry with bell peppers and pork, hoping to bring some semblance of normalcy to our dinner. Bring me the mayo, Alex commanded abruptly, breaking his long silence. Sure, here you are, I replied, handing him the mayonnaise. His first words to me in ages were not of gratitude or conversation, but a mere order. It was the final straw, the breaking point of my patience and tolerance. The evening took a turn for the worse when Mrs. Whitmore demanded, "Clean the toilet." What? Now? I was aghast. Yes, now, she insisted, her voice dripping with venom. I snapped back, unable to contain my frustration. Don't say such a thing while we're eating. It's nasty. Just like your heart, she hissed. Our argument escalated quickly, with Alex interjecting, demanding I apologize to his mother. But I refused, standing my ground for the first time in years. The conflict reached its peak, and in that moment a decision crystallized within me. I needed to escape this toxic environment, not just for my sake but for my son's as well. I retreated to my room, my resolve hardening. I downloaded divorce papers, filled them out, and slammed them in front of Alex. His shock was palpable, but I felt nothing but a cold determination. I'm filing these, I declared, my voice steady. As I stood there facing my husband's bewildered expression, I realized I had finally stepped out of the shadows. It was time to reclaim my life. The days following my declaration of divorce were a whirlwind of cold glares and biting remarks. But amidst this storm I found an unfamiliar sense of liberation. One evening, as I served dinner, Mrs. Whitmore looked at the meal with disdain. "You call this food? Even a child cooks better." I bit my tongue, focusing on my son's smiling face. "Eat up, sweetheart. I made your favorite tonight." Alex chimed in, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, playing the perfect mother now, are we? What a joke!" I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but I kept my composure. "I'm just trying to make a nice dinner for our son." Mrs. Whitmore snorted. "Don't act high and mighty. You're just a burden in this house." The tension at the table was palpable. Alex's attempts to belittle me only intensified. "So, Alara, have you thought about how you'll survive after the divorce? You can barely keep a house, let alone your own life." I looked him straight in the eye. "I have been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son." His smirk faded slightly, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Mrs. Whitmore quickly intervened. "Don't be absurd. You need us more than we need you." The conversation turned to finances, a topic they usually avoided. "You do realize that without my salary, this household would crumble?" I stated, more to myself than to them. Mrs. Whitmore scoffed. "We'll manage. We don't need your pity money." But Alex's silence spoke volumes. He knew the truth. Without my income, they would be in dire straits. In the following days, their behavior became increasingly erratic. Mrs. Whitmore would oscillate between trying to sweet-talk me into staying and hurling insults when I didn't comply. Alex, on the other hand, seemed lost, his arrogant facade crumbling as the reality of his financial dependence became undeniable. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation between them that chilled me to the bone. "She can't leave us like this," Alex hissed. "We need her money." Mrs. Whitmore's reply was cold and calculated. "Don't worry. I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable she won't dare to leave." Hearing their true intentions laid bare was a revelation. They didn't care about me or even our son. It was all about control and money. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan began to form in my mind. If they wanted a battle, I would give them one. But it wouldn't be fought with words or petty arguments. I would hit them where it hurt the most, their pride and their pockets. The next morning, I started putting my plan into action. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who came highly recommended. "I want a divorce, and I want to make sure they don't get a penny more than they deserve," I told her. She nodded, her eyes glinting with determination. "We'll make sure of that. You've been the sole breadwinner, right? We'll use that." As the days passed, my resolve only grew stronger. I started documenting everything, the insults, the financial manipulation, even the smallest of grievances. It was time to turn the tables. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. And as I built my case, a sense of empowerment filled me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny. The shadows of contempt were slowly lifting, and in their place a new dawn was emerging. As the divorce proceedings began, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly toxic. Yet, with each passing day, my sense of fear diminished, replaced by a steely resolve. One evening, Mrs. Whitmore tried a different tactic. "Ilara, dear, why don't we forget all this nasty business? You know we're family." Her words dripped with insincerity. I met her gaze, unwavering. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me." Alex, who had been quietly observing, scoffed. "Oh, playing the victim now? You're not as innocent as you pretend to be. I felt a surge of anger, but kept my voice calm. I'm not playing anything, Alex. I'm just no longer willing to be your scapegoat. The conversation turned, as it often did, to finances. You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him? Alex challenged. I smiled, a small, confident curve of my lips. I've been supporting this family for years. I think I can manage. Mrs. Whitmore's expression twisted into a sneer. You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back. But their words no longer held power over me. I knew my worth, and I knew the truth. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. She laid out the strategy clearly. We'll expose their financial dependency on you. It will play a crucial role in the custody battle and the division of assets. I nodded, feeling a sense of vindication. The law was on my side, and I was ready to fight. Back at home, the tension reached a boiling point. Mrs. Whitmore's attempts to undermine me became more desperate. You think you're so smart, she spat one evening. But you're just a cold-hearted woman, abandoning your family. I looked her straight in the eyes. No, I'm a woman who's finally standing up for herself. Alex jumped in, his voice laced with venom. You'll regret this. You can't survive without me. But his threats fell on deaf ears. I was done being intimidated. As the days went by, my preparations for the court battle intensified. I gathered financial statements, recorded their abusive remarks, and collected evidence of their negligence. One afternoon, as I was organizing my documents, my son came to me. Mom, are we going to be okay? His voice was small, uncertain. I pulled him into a hug, feeling a surge of protectiveness. Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place, and we're going to start a new, happy life. Just you and me. His arms tightened around me, and in that moment I knew I was making the right decision. I was fighting not just for myself, but for my son's future. The day of the court hearing loomed closer, and with it a sense of impending freedom. I was ready to face Alex and Mrs. Whitmore, ready to end their reign of control and emotional abuse. I was ready to reclaim my life and give my son the peace and happiness he deserved. It was time for justice, and I was determined to see it served. The day of the court hearing arrived, a day I had been anticipating with a mix of dread and determination. As I sat across from Alex and Mrs. Whitmore in the courtroom, I felt a sense of surrealism. This was the moment where everything would change. The proceedings began with a cold formality. Alex's lawyer portrayed him as a devoted husband and father, struggling under the weight of false accusations. Mrs. Whitmore played the part of the grieving mother-in-law, wronged by an ungrateful daughter-in-law. But their performance was transparent, their lies brittle. When my turn came, I spoke clearly, my voice steady. I have been the sole provider for this family for years. My husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulation have been constant sources of strain. Alex interjected, his voice laced with false hurt. Alara, how can you say these things? I've always supported you. I turned to him, my gaze unwavering. Support is more than just words, Alex. It's about actions, and your actions have shown nothing but selfishness and cruelty. The judge listened intently as I presented my evidence. Financial statements, recordings of their verbal abuse, testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed their behavior. The truth was undeniable. As the evidence mounted, Alex's facade began to crumble. Mrs. Whitmore's composure cracked, her mask of innocence slipping away. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with tension. Then came the revelation that sealed their fate. My lawyer presented photographs and documents proving Alex's infidelity and Mrs. Whitmore's illicit affair with a wealthy neighbor, Mr. Harwood. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as the images were displayed, showing them in compromising positions, their deception laid bare for all to see. Alex's face turned ashen, his eyes wide with shock. Mrs. Whitmore's expression twisted into one of fury, her hands trembling. You invaded our privacy! Mrs. Whitmore shrieked, her voice shrill. I looked at her, my voice calm but firm. No, I exposed the truth, a truth that you both have been hiding for too long. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Their credibility was shattered, their lies exposed in the harsh light of the courtroom. As the hearing came to a close, the judge's verdict was clear. I was granted full custody of our son and a fair division of assets was ordered. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were left with little more than their shattered reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The years of manipulation and emotional abuse were finally over. I had stood up to my oppressors and emerged victorious. But the sweetest moment came when my son ran into my arms outside the courthouse, his face bright with relief and happiness. "We did it, Mom," he said, his voice filled with joy. "Yes, we did," I replied, holding him close. "We're free now. It's just the beginning for us." And as we walked away, hand in hand, I knew that this was not just a victory for me. It was a victory for every person who had ever been made to feel small, powerless, or unworthy. It was a victory for truth and justice. It was the start of a new chapter, a chapter filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. The aftermath of the court ruling was immediate and tumultuous. Word of Alex and Mrs. Guest Whitmore's deceit spread like wildfire, tarnishing their reputations in our small community. They were no longer able to hide behind their facade of respectability. In the days following the verdict, I focused on rebuilding my life with my son, but I couldn't ignore the sense of satisfaction that came from knowing Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were facing the consequences of their actions. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I received an unexpected visitor. It was Mr. Harwood's wife, Mrs. Harwood, her eyes red with unshed tears. "Alara, I heard about everything. I can't believe what Sylvia, Mrs. Whitmore, did." Her voice broke, and I could see the pain etched on her face. I invited her in, offering a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she poured out her heartache. I trusted her as a neighbor, as a friend, and to think she was having an affair with my husband. I listened, offering words of comfort. It was clear that Mrs. Whitmore's actions had caused more damage than she had ever anticipated. The next day I encountered Alex in town. He was a shadow of the man he once was, his arrogance replaced by a look of defeat. "Alara, please, can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I stopped, facing him. "What is there to talk about, Alex?" He fidgeted, unable to meet my eyes. I'm sorry, for everything. I didn't realize how much I depended on you, on your strength." His apology, though late, was a testament to the shift in power. He had lost everything, his dignity, his home, his family, and in that loss he had finally recognized his own faults. But it was Mrs. Whitmore who faced the harshest backlash. Her affair with Mr. Harwood had not only ruined her reputation but had also led to legal troubles. Mrs. Harwood had filed for divorce and was pursuing a lawsuit against her for alienation of affection. I heard about Mrs. Whitmore's plight from neighbors, the whispers and rumors painting a picture of a woman undone by her own actions. She had become an outcast, shunned by those she had once considered friends. One afternoon I saw her at the grocery store, her eyes downcast as she hurried through the aisles. Our paths crossed, and for a moment our eyes met. The look of resentment and defeat in her eyes was unmistakable. "You did this to me," she hissed under her breath as she passed by. I watched her go, feeling a mix of pity and vindication. "No, Sylvia, you did this to yourself," I whispered to myself. The tides of justice had turned, and the consequences of their actions were now inescapable. Alex and Mrs. Whitmore were living the life they had crafted through years of deceit and manipulation. And as I watched them struggle with the aftermath, I knew that best revenge was living well, free from their toxic influence. As I turned my focus back to my son and our new life, I realized that this was not just a story of revenge. It was a story of liberation, of breaking free from the chains of abuse and control. And as I looked to the future, I knew that the best was yet